Tom Williams was seated in a chair on his covered patio, awaiting the arrival of his wife, Julia, whom he had married nearly 20 years prior. Sarah Miles, a friend and colleague, was seated at a right angle to his right. He took a drag from his cigarette and crushed it in the ashtray on the table. In front of him, she took a sip of coffee and lit another cigarette. "Are you okay, Tom?" she asked. He shook his head slowly, indicating that he was not truly okay. "I'm glad you're here," she said. "That's what friends are for." He nodded his head and was suddenly overcome with memories of his marriage, which had lasted nearly 22 years. He completed his 4-year. He served in the Marine Corps for a year, during which he worked as a military policeman and as a member of parliament. His lifelong ambition was to become a police officer. In particular, he aspired to become a detective. After completing his service in the Corps, he returned to college as a full-time student who was taking advantage of his veterans' benefits. His goal was to obtain a degree in criminal justice and become a police officer. He met Julia, who was finishing her business degree. They were taking the same business law class. She immediately took a liking to the Marine combat veteran. He was over 180 centimeters tall and weighed 90 kilograms. He was solidly built. He had broad shoulders and narrow hips, and he appeared formidable in any uniform he wore. They began dating and subsequently married after graduating from high school. She was approximately 5 years his junior and had already been engaged once. She never disclosed the reason for their separation, only stating that he had graduated from high school a couple of years before her and relocated to New York. He was indifferent to her previous romantic partners. He was known to be somewhat promiscuous, pursuing relationships with various women. However, upon meeting Julie, he recognized her as his destined partner and was resolved to settle down with her. They wed immediately after graduating from high school. Despite his ability to integrate into the police department, it took 6 months. Before he could gain admission to the police academy, he was assigned to work as a 911 dispatcher. He was aware that this was a provisional role, but he was grateful for the opportunity to contribute and receive remuneration. Julie commenced employment at an investment firm with a national presence. They were able to afford a modest but comfortable apartment, which suited their needs. They spent the majority of their time in terms of their time in the bedroom. She was satisfied with her job, although the only aspect of her role that Tom found disagreeable was the mandatory quarterly meetings held in either Washington, D.C. or New York. These meetings typically involved seminars on the latest changes in legislation and occasionally included meetings with various officials. She asserted that the trips usually lasted only 3 days, but the duration of his absence could extend up to a week. He experienced distress when she was away from him, but she surprised him when she returned. She gave birth to their first child, Andrew, approximately 6 months after he graduated from the police academy, which was about a year and a half after they were married. 2 years later, she gave birth to their second child, Marie. She had a challenging experience during the birth of Marie. He was persuaded to undergo a vasectomy, and both children inherited their mother's blonde hair and piercing blue eyes. His mother suggested that they test their DNA to confirm paternity, but he rejected her suggestions, stating that Julie would never cheat on him. Approximately 5.5 years after joining the police, Tom took the detective examination, and he aced the written exam, and the oral exam was similarly straightforward, thanks to his dedication to continued study and time spent in the academy's core curriculum. Given his early success, many were surprised when he was promoted. However, the timing was fortuitous, as the department was seeking to expand its facilities to accommodate the growing family. They identified a suitable 2-bedroom property and made an offer. The third narrative is as follows: they purchased a house with 2 bedrooms in a satisfactory neighborhood. Julie had received a few promotions and was also earning more money. A couple of months after he became a detective, he accompanied Julie to her company's Christmas event, which was held in the ballroom of the local Marriott Hotel. There, Julie introduced him to A.L.F. Henriksen, a middle manager who recently relocated from New York City, renowned for his excellence in the field, extended a greeting to Alf. "I have just learned that you have become a detective. I am reassured by your presence in the field, and I thank you for your service." Tom, however, was not entirely at ease in the presence of this individual. Despite his long blonde hair and striking blue eyes, there was something about this man that left him with an unsettling feeling, similar to the one he had experienced with Julie. The man's eyes were the deepest blue Tom had ever seen on a person, but there was something else about this individual that caused him to feel uneasy. He could not, however, identify precisely what was troubling him. "You seem to be the stronger one, he asked, his tone of voice indicating that he was confused. "I was once engaged to Jules," the man replied, his grin indicating that he was aware of Tom's confusion. "This was before I..." Upon graduating from high school and relocating to New York, Tom observed, "I am gratified that we have finally met." ALF then inquired about Tom's reputation, prompting him to confirm the veracity of the stories surrounding him. Tom proceeded to elucidate the circumstances surrounding his receipt of the Silver Star, a military decoration. In response, ALF expressed gratitude for Tom's service, emphasizing that he was merely performing his duties. In a solemn tone, the true heroes are typically those who return home in coffins. Tom engaged in dancing with his wife and observed her dancing with Alf on 2 occasions. He observed the tall man whisper something to Julie, but did not notice any inappropriate physical contact between them. When they finished dancing, he escorted Julie back to their table and handed her back to him in a clear and deliberate manner. "It was nice to see you again," he said. Julie Alf said, "It has been my great pleasure to finally meet you, sir." He added, "I am pleased to make your acquaintance," with a slight bow to Tom. Tom said, "I see you have met Alf. I am pleased to hear that you have finally met the man I have been telling you about." Tom turned to Julie and asked, "Was this the guy you were engaged to in college before we met?" Julie replied, "Yes, it was him. He works in New York, and we don't see each other often," she said. "I work in a completely different department than he does. I'm sorry, I just didn't think it really mattered. It was so long ago. However, you're right. I probably should have told you about this. Forgive me." Tom smiled and giggled. "Of course," he said. "So, what happened between you two?" "If you don't mind me asking." "Not at all," she said. "I wanted to get married and have..." He desired the benefits of marriage but not the responsibilities that accompany it. These include the financial obligations associated with raising a family, such as mortgage payments and other expenses. When he relocated to New York, he made it clear that he would probably pursue relationships with other women. "I decided it would be preferable to end the engagement." Tom inquired whether she had any regrets. She replied that she had everything a woman could desire. She then took his right hand in hers. She placed her left hand on his right and kissed it. "Right now, I would love it if you could take me to our bedroom and make mad passionate love to me. Your desire is my law, my love." He informed her that he never met Alf again and that Julie never mentioned his name. Consequently, he put the meeting aside and never thought about it again. The quarterly meetings continued, and Tom never observed any behavior or actions on her part that indicated there was a problem. She was always loving and attentive, and their married life seemed quite prosperous as time went on. Tom met several of Julie's friends from her office. They seemed friendly enough, but he had the feeling that they were hiding something. He became quite close to Alice, one of her colleagues, when she and her husband witnessed an armed robbery at a bank downtown. He caught the robber and the couple. By this time, he had served in the police force for more than 17 years and had risen to the rank of police lieutenant. He would occasionally stop by Julie's office for lunch and consistently attempted to ascertain Alice's well-being, as she and her husband had endured psychological distress due to the robbery. Nevertheless, he held them in high regard. The courage of the witness was evident when she stood up and testified in court. When the prosecutor asked her if she could identify the man, she answered in the affirmative and pointed directly at the accused, loudly proclaiming that it was he. This occurred approximately 2.5 years ago. However, recently, the witness noticed that Alice looked at him strangely when he passed by. This look was similar to the one he had seen on several occasions on Julia's colleagues. The behavior of the workers at company events attended by the subject and her spouse initially appeared peculiar to the subject, though he did not attach any significance to it. One day, however, he resolved to ascertain the source of his wife's distress. He proceeded to the room where Julia and Alice were working and made his way towards his wife's office. However, Alice intercepted him before he could reach his destination. Julie had temporarily left the premises and informed him of her encounter with Tom. She inquired as to the projected return date. She stated that she needed to deliver some paperwork to the legal department, which would require her to be absent for an undetermined period of time. Alice observed the expression on her face and decided to inquire further. He asked Alice if there were any issues between her and her husband. She replied that everything was fine between them. However, she expressed curiosity about whether he was aware that Julie was dating Alf during their time in the East. "That is not accurate," Tom stated. "Why did you inquire about this? You and your spouse have an open marriage, and you are comfortable with it because of your traumatic experience," she replied. Alice said something to that effect. Tom inquired as to whether she had any evidence to substantiate her claims. She replied that she had photographs taken on her mobile phone during their last visit. He requested that she send them via email, which she agreed to do. He then wrote his email address on the back of his business card and handed it to her. He then asked how long this relationship had been going on. She replied that she was unsure, but had seen her with him every time they had visited. He then asked how long it had been since he had. "I've been here," she informed him. "Do me a favor, please. Don't tell her anything about me being here," he requested, his voice low. "I'll send them to you right now." "Thank you, Alice," he said. "And, by the way, I've never been injured in the line of duty, and I can have sex just fine." With these words, he departed. His mind and heart were in turmoil. He wondered if she had been unfaithful to him with Alfreza's, as they often exhibited signs of involvement in an illicit relationship. However, he was unable to ascertain this information. It is worth noting that Julia consistently exhibited loving and attentive behavior, providing no indication of any illicit activities. It is also important to mention that he did not subject her luggage to inspection or demand a detailed account of her daily itinerary. She did, however, adhere to a routine of calling him every evening when she was not at home. Nevertheless, he was not entirely convinced of her sincerity and thus resolved to await the arrival of the photographs before taking further action. He received them approximately 10 minutes later. After he departed from Julie's workplace, he experienced a significant physiological reaction when he observed the photographs. He observed Julie engaged in a kiss with another individual while dancing and noticed his hand positioned on her lower extremity, which was partially obscured by a short skirt that he had never previously observed her wearing. His eyes became inundated with tears when he viewed the photograph of the two individuals entering an elevator. She smiled at him, her gaze directed at him with a familiarity he recognized. This was the same gaze she often directed at him prior to engaging in sexual intercourse. Upon returning to his office, he discovered it. It was challenging to maintain focus on his work, particularly when he observed the situation board. He opted to conclude his day and proceed to his residence. "Are you well, Lieutenant?" inquired one of the other detectives as he exited the premises. "I believe I may have experienced some gastric distress," he replied. "I intend to return home for the remainder of the day." "Very well," the detective responded. "I look forward to seeing you tomorrow." "I will," Tom said, departing the room and making his way back to his residence. He procured a beer and took a seat at his computer. He accessed his calendar to ascertain the date of Julia's next scheduled trip back east. It would transpire just a couple of days later on Friday, according to the colored strip that highlighted the days on the calendar. She would be gone for a whole week. He copied the photos from his phone to his computer and enhanced them. He zoomed in on Alpha's face, and this was when his world came crashing down. He now understood why this man's face had awakened something in him all those years ago when they had met. He took out photographs of his two children and compared them with Al's. He thought, and so it begins. Andrew bore a striking resemblance to Alf, and Marie was in a state of emotional distress. He was compelled to obtain evidence substantiating their provenance. He located the contact details of a company specializing in rapid and precise DNA analysis and proceeded to place a call. After requesting that they temporarily set aside the first aid kit, he was preparing to depart when his mobile phone rang. He recognized the sound of the beep as an indication that it was Julie on the line. "Hello," he responded. "Tom, are you well?" she inquired, her tone conveying concern. "I'm fine," he replied. "It's just the case I'm working on." He expressed his frustration, noting that his stomach was upset. She inquired about the situation, and he explained that he had a week-long trip back east, during which he would be working late with the managers on the itinerary, She suggested they go out for dinner and drinks, which would prevent him from returning until after 11. He asked if she could watch the children that night, and she replied that it was not an unusual arrangement. She typically met with management before their quarterly meeting and would likely return home well after 11. "Thank you very much," she said. "Please ensure that they retire for the night at 9 p.m. On the 30th, the children have tests and I want them to get a good night's sleep." "You are the best," she said. Tufar was to treat it in the same manner as he would any criminal case, with a cold, hard detachment, following the clues and seeing where they led. He took a DNA test and returned home before the children. He then realized that he would have to wait until they were asleep before he could obtain any information from them. The last thing he wanted was for them to know what was going on. They were not stupid and would have known what was going on if he had asked them for a cheek swab. He hated the ploy but decided to proceed. It was necessary for him to contact Roger Dunleavy, a former police detective who had retired a couple of years ago and subsequently relocated to New York, his hometown. Dunleavy had founded his own private investigative service with a specialty in catching cheating spouses. Tom Williams inquired as to whether this was indeed Roger Dunleavy on the phone. "It's me," Tom said. "How are things going lately?" "Well," Roger replied, "there are more cheating spouses than you can imagine. This has been going on for a considerable length of time." Roger posited that she would be in town for approximately a week, commencing on Friday. Tom stated that he would forward her itinerary and a photograph of her with the individual whom he suspects is her unfaithful partner. "It is my understanding that you require the full range of services." Roger confirmed that these would include audio, video, photographs, a written report, and so forth. "However, I must know the whole truth. Therefore, could you please inform me of the cost? Once, simply cover my expenses, purchase me a beer, and we will conclude this matter." "I have no intention of exploiting you," Tom said. "Damn it," Roger replied, his New York accent eliciting a hearty laugh from Tom. "I am in your debt." "Thank you, Roger. You are a true friend. Let me provide you with my secure email address," Tom wrote, "so that you may contact me directly." "I appreciate your assistance, Roger. I will forward her itinerary to you as soon as I receive it." "I'll dig," said Roger. "We'll talk soon." They ended the conversation just as the children returned home from school. "Is pizza okay for today, guys?" he asked, entering the living room. "Yes, of course," they replied. "Mom left for one of her meetings again," Andrew said. "A week," Marie added. Then, Tom said, noting the sarcasm in Marie's voice. "A week," he repeated. "You two need to be on your best behavior," he said. "You know I'm armed and handcuffed," he added jokingly, making them both laugh. He ordered pizza and they ate in the living room while watching TV. "Are you prepared for tomorrow's tests?" he asked. "Yes, to a large extent," Marie said. Andrew said the same thing. "Perhaps you should spend some time with your books before heading to the bunk," he said, using the nautical term for bed. "Mom lets us stay until 10, she said." "Andrew, don't be foolish," said Tom. "Lights out exactly at 9, he said. "Should the time not be 9 p.m.? The father inquired of Marie. "You are correct, my dear daughter." Tom then instructed her, "Now, come on, go upstairs." They proceeded to collect their books and ascend to their respective rooms. Tom observed their departure and reflected on their upbringing. He considered them to be exemplary children and expressed profound affection for them. However, he harbored concerns about the veracity of his suspicions. He returned to his office and retrieved a pristine white notebook. He intended to treat this matter with the utmost seriousness. He wanted to conduct a thorough investigation. He placed the paper in it and began to take notes, starting with the information Alice had provided. He printed and attached the photos she had sent him. He then placed the comparison photographs he had taken of the children's faces in a notebook and wrote underneath them paternity. He opened his calendar and quickly glanced at the dates of the meetings. The meetings with Julia occurred at 3-month intervals, as if by design. After noting the children's birth dates, he initiated a countdown and realized that in both cases, her pregnancy apparently began around the time of these meetings. These coincidences prompted him to reflect on the conversation they had on the way back from the party where he met Alf. What did she say? This was after she informed him that she had no regrets. "I have everything a girl could dream of," she told him. "Certainly a lover with a great deal of equipment and a husband who is unaware of her activities and who takes care of her children while she goes off to have sex in the big city." He thought to himself, "Damn her." He looked at his watch and saw that it was 9, the time is 45 p.m. He closed the notebook and placed it in his desk drawer. He retrieved the DNA test kit and observed that the lights were off in the children's bedrooms. He proceeded to approach the bedrooms and look inside. His 2 children were asleep. He gathered the necessary items and, in a swift motion, obtained 2 samples. He then proceeded to obtain fresh DNA samples from the children without disturbing them. He ensured that the samples were adequately covered and kissed their foreheads before leaving their rooms. He then added his own DNA to the kit, completed the necessary paperwork, and placed it all in his briefcase. He recognized that this was an unpleasant task but ultimately determined that it was a necessary one. In his deck chair, he contemplated the current situation and the potential actions he would take once he learned the truth. He recognized that if she had been unfaithful to him, divorce would be an inevitable outcome. However, this realization opened up a host of additional considerations. He considered the potential implications of the situation for child custody, child support, and alimony. He made a note to consult with a family law attorney, as there were other legal issues that required attention. Could she be charged with fraud or perjury if she knew Alf was the father but listed him on the birth certificate? If Alf were to be confirmed as the father, could he be held liable for child support? He found himself questioning the gravity of his actions. He retired to bed but was unable to sleep. Julie returned from her meeting around 11:45 a.m. Upon discovering him still awake in bed, she inquired as to his well-being. He responded that he was not truly okay. She then asked if he would like to discuss the matter further. He informed her that he was currently working on a case involving a man who discovered that his entire marriage was a lie and that the children he had supported for over a decade were not even his biological offspring. She expressed shock and disbelief at the situation. He abruptly responded, "Damn," and killed her. He then proceeded to kill the children with his bare hands and ultimately committed suicide. "This poor man," she said, looked at her before saying anything else. He stated, "I am unsure if you believe me." She inquired as to whether he believed her. He replied that he did. She then stated that it would be preferable if they proceeded in this manner. He agreed. She then informed him that she would be departing a day earlier than anticipated on Thursday. He inquired as to why. She explained that she needed to resolve a matter there before the official meetings commenced. He then asked when she planned to pack her belongings. She replied that she would do so the following morning before her work shift. She then informed him that she had left a copy of her itinerary for him on the kitchen table. He apologized for the delayed notification. Regarding the reservation, he inquired as to its status. She informed him that it had been completed earlier that morning. He then asked if she had known about it since that morning. She replied that this was a problem. He then expressed his hope to see her one more time before her departure. She expressed her shock and stated that she needed to take a shower and change her clothes before going to bed. He agreed that she should do so. She expressed her fatigue and gratitude for his understanding. He then seized the opportunity to take possession of her mobile phone, which he had previously accessed with the code she had used for years. He was perplexed by the sudden change in the code. He returned the phone and continued to search through her belongings. This was a new experience for him, and he was curious about what he might find. He discovered a box labeled Plan B, and beneath it was written "Emergency Contraceptive." He was aware of the purpose of this medication and experienced a further decline in his emotional state. He was aware that she was still taking the pills which she had claimed helped regulate her menstrual cycle. While this may have been the case, there was only one reason for this, and it made him feel uncomfortable. He then took a photograph with his mobile telephone and replaced the box in its original position before returning to bed. When Julie emerged from the bathroom, she lay down in bed and snuggled up to Tom instead of embracing him as he was accustomed to. He rolled away from her as far as he could, overcome with disdain. She retreated from the bed, her eyes brimming with tears. He wondered whether she was aware of his feelings. The following morning, he did not utter a word to her while he proceeded to pack his belongings, shower, shave, dress for work, and then go downstairs for his morning coffee. He retrieved the itinerary she had left on the counter and placed it in his briefcase. After walking the children to school, he proceeded to the door. She inquired as to whether he would even kiss her goodbye. He stopped, turned, and looked at her without uttering a word. "Her," he said. "Of course I know. Call me when you get there." He then proceeded to exit the premises, leaving her standing and pondering the extent of his awareness regarding the matter at hand. She surmised that this situation was causing him significant distress. Tom proceeded to scan and email Julia's itinerary to Roger, along with any photographs he had of her. Furthermore, Alf procured DNA samples and scheduled an afternoon meeting with Lucy Hawkins, a prominent figure in the field of divorce law who was particularly adept at handling cases involving unfaithful spouses. Many within the police force regarded her as the policeman's best friend, a moniker derived from her reputation as a formidable adversary of those who perpetrated fraud, particularly those who targeted law enforcement officials. Ultimately, he forced himself to go to work, believing that he had achieved his goal. However, he received a call from his superior, Captain Smith, who instructed him to get to my office quickly. "I'm on my way," he replied, grimacing at his colleagues. "Close the door," Tom Smith said when Tom appeared. "Sit down." "Okay," he replied. Before he could fall, Tom was sitting in the captain's office. Smith closed the blinds and looked at Tom before speaking. "Please lay it out," said Smith. "What is happening?" "I believe my wife is cheating on me." "Welcome to the club, buddy," said Smith. "This is something that happens to all of us at one time or another." "You don't understand." Tom inquired as to whether Smith's case was exceptional. He expressed his suspicion that his wife had been unfaithful throughout their marriage. Smith expressed his belief that the children were not even his biological offspring. He responded with dismay, expressing regret at this situation. He informed Tom of his scheduled appointment with Lucy later that afternoon. Tom suggested that he might stop by if it would be helpful. Smith advised Tom to speak with Wilkerson, a local psychiatrist. Tom inquired as to whether this would be beneficial. Smith responded that it would not be detrimental, given the circumstances. He then stated that he required Tom to be at his optimal state of mind and that, unfortunately, he did not require Tom's assistance at that moment. Smith acknowledged that Tom's circumstances had reached a nadir but reassured him that he was not the first individual to experience such a situation. He offered his support and assistance if needed. Additional time to attend to your personal affairs is acceptable, but do not neglect your business. Reassess your situation and resume your duties. Do you understand? "I do, Captain," replied Smith. "Good. Get out of here, you unproductive individual," the captain added with a smile and a wink. Smith considered the captain's words. He proceeded to visit Donna Wilkerson, having first contacted the remainder of the crew. He was gratified to find that, on this occasion, the formidable Tom Williams was actually knocking on his door. Donna was an attractive woman, with brown hair and brown eyes. She was approximately 5 years his junior and was of a robust constitution, with a well-toned C-section. She had a curvaceous figure and shapely legs. She was also married and had 3 children. He entered her office and closed the door before sitting down. "This must be serious." "What's going on, Lieutenant?" He informed her of what he had learned thus far, but he did not yet have any concrete evidence. She asked, "I'm in the process of getting it now." He replied, "Have you already talked to a lawyer?" "I have an appointment with Lucy Hawkins this afternoon," said Tom. Donna nodded her head. "This is serious, right?" she asked. "Yes," he replied. "If what I suspect is true, I will never be able to forgive her or turn a blind eye to it." "We are done," Donna said. "Have you already told the children?" she asked. "No," he replied. "Not yet. You know they'll be devastated by this. They may experience long-term psychological distress," he said. "I have always taught them to be truthful, regardless of initial discomfort. I cannot conceal this from them. Eventually, they will discover the truth. It is preferable for them to learn it from me directly." "How do you cope with this situation?" she asked. "Not very well," he replied. "If my suspicions are correct, the past 2 decades have been a lie." "Have you discussed this with your wife?" She inquired as to whether they had discussed this yet. He replied that he had not yet had the opportunity to gather all the facts. She suggested that perhaps they should talk further after he had resolved the discrepancies in the information he had gathered. She reminded him that his children were the most important thing in his life and that their needs must come first. He assured her that he had never forgotten that, but now it seemed that they were not even his children. She suggested that perhaps he was not the biological father. "Perhaps not," she said, "but there is no doubt that you are their father. You are the one who raised them and turned them into what they are today. Never forget that, Tom." "I won't forget, Donna." "I understand," he said. "I think we should talk a little more after you get all the facts together. You'll get through this, Tom. No matter how much it hurts now, you will get through this. Just don't let it destroy you or your children. Children, my door is always open. Tom, I want you to know that everything we discuss here will remain confidential. I appreciate it. Thank you. I will be in touch that afternoon." He found himself in the office of Lucy Hawkins, a legal counsel. She listened carefully as he told his story. He informed her that he already had a private detective in New York. She asked if he was waiting for the results. "The results of your DNA test?" she inquired. "That's correct," he replied. She nodded her head in agreement. "I don't want to jump to any hasty conclusions," she said. "Let's see what the evidence says before we take any drastic action." However, he felt compelled to point out that her behavior was causing him considerable concern. "She seems to be discussing you in her workplace," he said. "Technically, this could be grounds for legal action." He also expressed his unease about if she was aware that you were not the biological father when she signed the birth certificates, she could have been charged with paternity fraud and potentially perjury under state law. Tom inquired, and she responded affirmatively. She acknowledged that different states have varying approaches to such matters, but in this state, if she names you as the father and signs these certificates knowing that you are not the biological father, she could be subject to a fine of up to $10,000. If the biological father had been aware of the situation at the time, it could have constituted a conspiracy, which is a felony in this state. "Yes, it could be a problematic situation," Tom replied. "I will open a case, but I will not prepare any documentation until we. In the interim, it would be prudent to gather evidence. I will engage my investigators to ascertain further information. It is imperative to maintain constant communication and to avoid any actions that might arouse Julie's suspicion. It is crucial to provide her with all the support she requires. It is essential to remain calm and avoid any impulsive or irrational actions. It is vital to remember that the well-being of your children is of paramount importance." He expressed concern. He said that they concluded the meeting and that Tom returned home immediately upon entering the premises. Roger contacted him. "Hey, buddy," Roger said. "How are you holding up?" Tom inquired. "I think I'm doing okay," Roger replied. "Julie must be on her way there already." "I just spoke with my lawyer," Tom explained. "We are waiting for evidence before we take action." He stated that the cost was approximately $200, but he was nevertheless able to install the camera in her room. It is voice and motion activated and has its own web server for downloading. "I will provide you with the IP address and you can verify it if you wish. You can even record streaming video." "Give me what I need," Tom said. Roger provided him with the necessary information. The address and login credentials were provided to Tom, who recorded them. "I'll be on my way to the airport soon. Her plane is due to land in about an hour, and I'll look after her. We'll talk to you soon." This concluded the conversation, and Tom proceeded to turn on his computer. Julie Williams sat in the window. Seated on a plane bound for New York, she reflected on her life. For almost 20 years, she had been married to the most wonderful man a girl could ever dream of. He was a respected and decorated police officer, dedicated to his job and his family. He was an amazing father to her 2 children. He died. The children were taught various skills including fishing, playing ball, and even using firearms. However, she felt a sense of guilt about her actions over the years. Alf was her first true love and he possessed the largest penis she had ever encountered. Furthermore, she was aware of his capabilities and desired to marry him and have children with him. However, he made it clear to her that he did not want to be responsible for children. She was sad when he left for New York and even sadder when he informed her that he would date other women. Nevertheless, she decided that if he could do it, then she could too. She then met Tom. Williams, a Marine veteran, aspired to become a police officer. Tom was similar to ALF in terms of physique. He could be demanding when necessary, but unlike Alpha, he treated her with respect. They fell in love and she decided to marry him. However, she also wanted Alpha's children. She maintained contact with Alf, primarily through email and text messages. Tom respected her enough to never inquire about her past, which she used to her advantage. Alf had established a reputation at Apex Financials, and it was his endorsement that secured her the position. Their affair began at the inaugural quarterly meeting in New York. She was aware that she would have to proceed with caution. To ensure her actions remained concealed, she took additional measures to maintain secrecy. She contacted him each evening when she was out and ensured she returned home immaculate, as she desired only to have children with Alpha. She devised a contraceptive schedule with her husband and agreed to take birth control pills until they were ready. She did, indeed, take the pills as agreed but ceased taking them just before their trips, often without informing her husband. On several occasions when he initiated sexual intercourse, she physically pushed him away, citing her menstrual cycle or general malaise. However, the truth was that she was reluctant to become pregnant with Alpha's child. 3 months into her training at the police academy, she became pregnant with Andrew. She was aware that he was Alpha's child, but she informed Tom that he was the father. He was taken aback because he was aware that she was taking contraceptive pills, but at the same time, he was excited at the prospect of having a child. When Andrew was born, she immediately recognized that he was Alpha's child. The infant was of the Alpha variety. Tom was so engrossed in watching the boy that he never paid any attention to it. However, his mother did, on more than one occasion. Tom insisted that his wife would never cheat and dropped the matter. Alf also knew that this was his child, but the two of them decided that she would call Tom father. The scenario was played out when she became pregnant with Marie. After Marie was born, she informed Tom that she had experienced a particularly challenging vaginal delivery and implored him to undergo a vasectomy. Concerned for his wife's well-being and safety, he consented to the procedure. Julie, thus, was relieved of the concern of ever becoming pregnant. Despite being pregnant by her husband, she continued to take the pills, informing him that they helped her menstrual cycle normalize. Her affair with Alf continued, and she saw him every time she flew east. Initially, they were reserved, not wanting to cause gossip in the office. She was not concerned about Tom ever meeting Al, as they were at least 1,000 miles apart. The distance between their residences was 1,000 miles. Alf had never visited their town until the night of the Christmas party. She approached him and advised him to maintain composure around Tom. She was reluctant to see a conflict between Alf and her husband. Alf responded, "I frequently deceive people. Your detective skills will not detect anything." She was somewhat surprised when she observed that the two men were conversing calmly. However, on their return journey, Tom initiated a discussion about her relationship with her former partner. When he inquired whether she had any misgivings, she evaded the question by stating that she possessed everything she had ever desired. In truth, she had a devoted husband who was also an excellent father, and she had a romantic partner who fulfilled her sexual needs. She continued to maintain a relationship with Alf, but over time, a few individuals began to take notice. Approximately 5 years ago, Alice, a new colleague, encountered her directly. To avoid causing complications, Alice provided a false account to Alice, stating, "Listen, Alice. My husband is aware of this situation. We have something." Alice was informed that her partner was amenable to an open marriage, provided that sexual encounters occurred outside of the city. Additionally, he had sustained injuries in the line of duty, which significantly impacted his ability to engage in sexual activity. Alice was urged to maintain confidentiality. Embarrassed by this situation, Alice nonetheless agreed to the arrangement. "I am of the opinion that this is not an appropriate course of action, but I will refrain from expressing my views. Thank you, Alice. Your support means a great deal to me. Tom and I are truly happy, and he has a wonderful rapport with children. I am reluctant to jeopardize this, and if it were ever to become known, he would be extremely distressed. However, over the past few days, he observed a change in his partner's demeanor. He suggested that the shift was merely a work-related issue, yet she questioned whether it might be a pretext for something more. Recently, she had begun contemplating the future. Andrew was nearing the end of his high school tenure and had expressed a desire to follow in Tom's footsteps. Marie was approaching her 17th birthday and was uncertain about her future aspirations. They would soon leave the family residence, and she found herself wondering what would come next. She and Alf had discussed the possibility of divorce, but she was inclined to postpone it until Tom's retirement. She could potentially receive half of his pension, along with half of everything else, from the police force. This would allow her to transfer to New York and be with Alf all the time. However, she was unsure if this was what he wanted. She was brought back to reality when the captain announced that the plane was beginning its descent to LaGuardia Airport. She sat down, noting the flashing sign above her head, set down her tray, and fastened her seat belt. Tom watched the monitor on his screen. He looked at his watch and estimated that she should be in her room by then. The video suddenly began to play, and he observed his wife's entrance into the room, accompanied by Alf. He was taken aback by the striking resemblance between this man and his children. As Julia placed her bags on the floor and turned to face Alf, she bestowed upon him a passionate kiss. Tom experienced a sudden sense of unease. A few minutes later, the two of them were engaged in a passionate embrace on the bed. "I needed this," she said, once they had concluded. "I needed this too," Alf replied. "Please do not discuss Tom in such a negative light." "I apologize," Julia said. "He is a highly esteemed police officer." "I understand," Alf replied. He responded in a derisive tone, "I see how much you respect him. He is so admirable that he remains unaware of your actions behind his back for so many years. After all, he has been raising my children throughout this period, yet he is still unaware of the truth. Perhaps I should send him a card for Father's Day to express gratitude for his exemplary performance." "You are not to do so." He inquired, "Are you going to leave him?" She replied, "Not until the children leave the house." He then suggested, "Perhaps only after he retires. That way, I can receive a substantial portion of his pension." She acknowledged, "I was thinking about that." He requested that she be transferred to his department, stating that she would retain her work history and that they would remain together indefinitely. "What is your opinion on this matter?" "After the children have left the nest," she replied, "once they have graduated, it will no longer be a concern at this time, as they require my presence with Tom." "At what point in time are we discussing this?" he inquired. "Marie will be turning 17 shortly," she responded. "I would estimate that it will be no more than 1.5 years, or perhaps 2 years at the most. Considering that we have been engaged in this endeavor for 2 decades, it should be relatively straightforward. I am eager for you to meet your children at the very least. Upon initial observation, it is likely that you will form a positive impression of them. However, it is important to recall the agreement that was made. It was agreed that there would be no contact between you and them. Furthermore, it was agreed that you would marry them off to Tom's children. It is also important to recall that you expressed interest in meeting them, but only after you have divorced." The policeman then made an announcement, stating that a table had been reserved for. "Dinner will be ready soon," she said. "I'll go take a shower and change clothes. See you downstairs in about half an hour." "See you then," he said, kissing her. "I really love you, Alf." "I love you too, Tom," she said, repeating her words to him. "I always did." "I love you too, Julie," he said. "See you downstairs." He got up and left the room while he watched Julia take out her cell phone. He retrieved his phone and dialed a number. A few seconds later, his phone rang. He pulled it out and considered sending it to voicemail. After a few rings, he answered, "Yes." Tom, it's me, Julie." "I know," he replied. "I just wanted to let you know that I got to New York." "Okay," she said. "How are things going with your case?" he asked. "I think we'll have everything settled by the time you get back," she replied. "I am in the final stages of apprehending my primary suspect." I am gratified that she permitted me to express my profound distress. "You are unaware of the extent of my anguish. I am dining out this evening, but I will contact you tomorrow night." "Affirmative." I am profoundly in love with you, Tom. You are aware of that, are you not? Affirmative. I will inform the children that you called and said hello. We will speak with you later. Bye. He terminated the call and reflected. If she had been aware that he had never expressed his love for her, she gazed at her phone for a few moments after he terminated the call. After a brief interval, he discerned from her demeanor that she was concerned. He then ensured that the video was stored on his hard drive and saved to a DVD, which he could later burn. He then proceeded to the living room, where the children had already. Upon returning home from school the following day, he received a call from the DNA laboratory. They informed him that they had received and analyzed his test sample. He proceeded to collect the results, which confirmed that none of the children present were his. He then took the DVD he had recorded the previous night and the DNA test results to Luce's office. The DNA test results were deemed reliable, however, the video evidence was deemed inadmissible in a court of law. Nevertheless, I believe we have sufficient data to commence the process. We will file for divorce on grounds of adultery and fraud. This is a community property, but the court considers adultery when dividing the property. However, I am uncertain whether we can address paternity fraud, as the evidence cannot be presented in court. What if I could persuade her to admit her actions? He inquired, perhaps in the presence of witnesses, and I will consider this for a moment. She said, come see me on Wednesday. I will have formulated a plan by then. I will see you on Wednesday, he replied before leaving that night. Julie called as usual right after she had sex with Alf. She was adept at ensuring her lover was silent while she was on the phone. After years of deception, they succeeded. Tom ensured that he never told her. On Wednesday, he met with Lucy. She had requested this meeting. There was another man in her office. This man was Marvin Morrison, the district attorney. There was another person in the room. This person was a deputy named Sarah Miles. Tom had worked with her several times in the past. They had become good friends. Before the meeting began, they all shook hands. Lieutenant Williams, Marvin said, Lucy brought your case to me. I must respectfully disagree with your assertion that your wife's actions were merely inadvertent. In order to proceed with a case of deliberate fraud, we require more than the video footage taken in her hotel room. What is your recommendation? I suggest that you request your wife to admit that she fraudulently signed these forms. This would allow us to apprehend her and charge her. I also suggest that you invite a witness, Marvin said. I assume you know Deputy Miles. That's correct, Tom replied. We know each other. It would be beneficial for them to witness their mother being taken into custody. Marvin concurred, suggesting that he would transfer custody of the mother to him and that they would adhere to the legal process. That evening, Tom confirmed her return when she called. He inquired as to whether she still planned to return on Saturday morning. She replied in the affirmative. Tom then proposed the idea of a celebration, which she accepted. I love you and miss you, Tom said in a neutral tone. Did you love me? She asked. Did you tell me you loved me or missed me at all this week? I loved you, he replied. We'll talk to you later. He ended the conversation, wondering if she had caught the past tense he had deliberately used. He looked at the monitor and saw her looking at the phone with a worried expression on her face. Simultaneously, he smiled as he observed her placing the phone down and ascending the bed adjacent to ALF. He inquired as to the nature of the gathering she was planning upon his return. She responded that she was unsure, but that something was troubling her. He then asked her to elaborate on the matter. She proceeded to explain that he had been displaying a distinct lack of warmth throughout the previous week. He then inquired as to whether she was aware of his recent involvement in a particularly challenging case. She responded that she was not. He then asked her whether she believed he was aware of their relationship. She replied that she was uncertain. I believe he is aware of our relationship and is devising a plan of action. What is the worst that could happen if he knows? He could choose to end the marriage. In that case, you would retain most of your assets, while he would be forced to live in a modest dwelling and subsist on cat food. Alternatively, he might decide to take the initiative and end the marriage. In that scenario, you would gain complete control of the assets. Why not focus on us instead of dwelling on his actions? Tom turned off the monitor and allowed the video to save to his hard drive. He presented a courageous demeanor to his children and joined them for dinner on Friday. Lucy contacted him and he proceeded to her office. Sarah was already awaiting him. "Tom, here are the divorce papers," Lucy stated. "We are filing a report on charges of adultery and fraud. I have requested custody and have asked that you retain the residence. Additionally, I have requested a 7,030 division of all marital assets, considering the judge may consider the duration and nature of the affair and the fraudulent activities that have occurred since the beginning of the marriage differently, but it is not possible to predict the outcome. I have also initiated legal proceedings against Alf Henriksen to secure compensation for child support and associated expenses. Deputy Miles will serve the paperwork on Saturday and, if necessary, make an arrest for fraud. I have forwarded the documents against Alf to New York and requested that they be served on him on Saturday morning. Tom said he would be at my house by 7:30 if it is feasible. He informed Sarah that her flight is scheduled to arrive at 7:00. It was 8 in the morning and the return journey would not take long. She knew the address and he confirmed that she was correct. He thanked her and took a deep breath. He informed them that it was time to take action that evening. He packed a couple of bags and took the children to Julie's parents. The children were perplexed by the unfolding events. "Won't Mommy come home tomorrow morning?" Andrew inquired. "Yes," Tom replied. "Then why can't we stay here?" Marie asked. "Listen, children," the father began. "I need to speak with your mother about something, and it would be preferable if you two were not present during this conversation." Tom interjected. "I will explain everything to you." On Saturday afternoon, Marie inquired as to whether her parents were planning to divorce. Tom responded that he would not divulge this information to his children. Marie then asked if her father had been unfaithful to her mother. Tom replied that he had not been unfaithful to his wife. "Another woman, Tom, are you suggesting that your wife was unfaithful to you?" Andrew asked. "Please, children, assist me in this matter." Upon arrival, Julie's mother greeted them at the door. "What is the nature of this visit?" she inquired. "I'm sorry to see Marie in this state," Tom replied. "I must speak with Julie when she returns. I will inform you of the details tomorrow afternoon. Are you contemplating any actions that might harm her?" "No," he responded. "I would never do such a thing." "You are divorcing her, aren't you?" Maggie inquired. "On the contrary," Tom replied. "I am in love with another woman." "I will be there tomorrow," Maggie said. "You will have to explain everything." "I will do so," Tom promised. "I will tell you the truth." "Julia," he observed her on video as she sat naked on the bed with Alf. "Will you be here tomorrow morning as planned?" he inquired. "I will do so," she replied. "How is your business going?" he asked. "Almost finished," she answered. "I expect that by this time tomorrow our suspect will be detained," she said. "Okay," he replied. "Then maybe everything will go back to normal." "Perhaps," he said, "I need to go eat. We'll talk to you in the morning." He ended the conversation and observed her on the video. He noted the presence of tears on her face as she regarded her phone. He smiled, thinking, "Oh yes, there will be much more of this tomorrow." On the following Saturday morning, Sarah arrived shortly before 7 a.m. and assisted him in preparing for the final confrontation. Tom had just extinguished his cigarette when he heard Julie's vehicle enter the garage. He hoped she would not discover the substantial pile of garbage bags containing her personal belongings. He listened intently and heard her high heels clicking on the floor as she walked to the back deck. She opened the back door and he waved his hand at her in an inviting gesture. "To the back veranda," Julie said. "I hope you had a good flight," he replied. "Yes," she answered, glancing around. "What's happening? Who is this? Where are the children? What is that patrol car at the entrance?" "The children are with your mother now. This is Deputy Sarah Miles and this is her patrol car out front. Please sit down. We need to talk. I need to take a shower first." "We must speak immediately," he said in a firm tone, visibly shocked. She slowly sat down in the seat opposite Sarah, positioning herself at a 90 degrees angle to Tom's left side. He then proceeded to pull out a digital audio recorder, press a button, and place it on the table. "I hope you don't mind if we record this conversation," he said. "Given the nature of this case, I believe it is necessary." Tom then added, "You have the right to remain silent. Silence is golden. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to a lawyer, but if you cannot afford to hire one, one will be provided for you. Do you understand these rights as I read them to you?" he asked. "Of course," she said, shocked but maintaining her composure. "I'm not one of your suspects. I don't need a lawyer because I haven't done anything wrong." "You are a suspect," Tom said, his voice firm but calm. "In fact, I am your primary suspect." He then proceeded to produce 2 sheets of paper, which he placed in front of Julia. He inquired as to whether she recognized them. She replied in the affirmative and stated that she would ascertain the truth of the matter. He then asked her what they were. She replied that they were children's birth certificates. He then nodded his head in acknowledgement for the record. He then informed her that they were certified true copies of the birth certificates of Andrew Jackson Williams, aged 18, and Mary Constance Williams, aged 16. He then stated for the record that the aforementioned individuals were the children in question. "Who is the individual whose name is listed on the signature line?" he inquired. "This is my signature," she replied, noting that it was present on both documents. "Could you please read the text that is listed beneath the signature?" he requested. "Yes, it states, I certify that the above is true and factual." "Who is the individual listed as the father?" he asked. "It is you," she answered. "Please read the name aloud." "Thomas Jefferson Williams," she read. "Pull out another piece of paper," he instructed. He then proceeded to place the document in front of her. "What is this?" she inquired. "It is a DNA test conducted by the Acme Laboratory in our local community," he replied. "Please direct your attention to 3 samples. Sample A was obtained from an adult male, specifically from an individual named Tom Williams. Sample B was taken from Andrew Williams, and Sample C was obtained from Mary Williams. Please refer to the summary below, which indicates that the subjects represented by Sample B and Sample C are related to each other." "Other," she said, "but neither sample is related to the subject represented by Sample A. In English, this means that I am not the biological father of the 2 children listed on these birth certificates." As he played the video of their initial encounter last week, she inquired about the circumstances surrounding its acquisition. He responded by posing a series of questions, including whether she and her partner, Alf Henriksen, had recently acknowledged him as the biological father of the children in question. Additionally, he questioned her about her awareness of their alleged plan to commit fraud by listing him as the father on the birth certificates, despite knowing that he was not the biological father. "This is not the case. I concede that I desired his children, not yours. I did indeed sign the birth certificate that lists you as the father. It is my prerogative to select who I wish to be regarded as the father of my children. However, you have no right to engage in fraud. Please elucidate. What did you tell your colleagues about your relationship with Mr. Henriksen?" She inquired about the nature of her relationship with Mr. Henriksen. He responded that it was irrelevant to the matter at hand. She then asked if he was acquainted with a certain Alice Blackstone. He confirmed this knowledge. She proceeded to inquire about a conversation she had had with him 5 years prior. He produced another sheet of paper and asked her to clarify. She replied that she had informed Alice that their relationship was open, but that they did not engage in such activities. He then asked if she recalled any other details of their conversation. She responded that he had told Alice that he had been injured in the line of duty and could no longer have sex, he said. "Do you remember this?" She sighed. "Yes, I remember that. According to what my lawyer found out, you told several others the same thing, right?" "Yes," he said. "So you admit that you lied about me to justify your actions with Alf?" "Yes," she said quietly. "I see no reason to continue this interview." "I have been notified," he said, looking at Sarah. "You have been notified." Sarah handed Julia a manila envelope. "Please," Julia said, tears streaming down her face. "Stand, turn around, and place your hands behind your back, Mrs. Williams. Sarah, you are under arrest on 2 counts of paternity fraud and 2 counts of conspiracy to commit fraud." Julia turned to face Tom and began to sob. "Tom, please. I love you. Please don't do this." "I'm glad to hear that from you," she said. "I shudder to think what you would do to me if you didn't like me," he replied, watching as Sarah led Julie, who was crying, away. Patrol car at the entrance. Sarah placed her in the back seat and drove away. Tom was relieved that the situation had concluded, yet he experienced a sense of emptiness that he had not anticipated. He had loved her for over 2 decades and he was perplexed by her betrayal. He was now confronted with the most challenging aspect of this situation. He would have to confront Julie's children and explain the circumstances surrounding their mother's imprisonment. He was compelled to confront Julie's children and parents and divulge the circumstances surrounding their mother's incarceration. He was the biological father and the one who had raised them. He retrieved his laptop and the USB drive containing the edited video and proceeded to Maggie's residence, contemplating the details he would divulge upon arrival. He knocked on the door and Maggie opened it, inviting him inside. He informed her that the children were in the backyard. He requested that she retrieve them and suggested that he might as well call Cliff. Tom posited that he should be made aware of the situation as well. Tom was Julie's father and Cliff had always looked up to him. A few minutes later, they were all in the living room. Cliff inquired as to Julie's whereabouts. He surmised that she was likely already in the county jail. Tom replied that she was in jail. Cliff then requested that everyone wait a moment. The others were similarly taken aback. Tom proceeded to relate the events in question, noting that the tale was quite lengthy. He then turned his gaze upon the children, hoping that they would not harbor negative sentiments towards him as a result of his actions. Nevertheless, he was aware that he had made the correct decision a considerable time ago. "Your mother elected to terminate our relationship," he began, indicating that she had chosen to end the bond between them. Everyone gasped, but Mary said, "I raised you, but I'm not your biological father." Tom said, "There was a guy she was engaged to more than 20 years ago. Before she met me, she wanted to marry him, but he did not want to take responsibility for children." "Wait a minute," Maggie said. "I remember this guy. He was a large guy, blonde with long hair. I think he's Norwegian. I have a photo of them around here somewhere." "His name was Alf Henriksen," Tom said. That may be so. Julia decided that she would have children with him, although he did not want them. Consequently, she did so, and is currently incarcerated for having sexual relations with another man. Andrew inquired as to whether that was the reason for her imprisonment. "No," Tom replied, "she is in jail for something called paternity fraud. When you were she completed the birth certificate and affixed her signature to it, stating that I was the father, despite being aware from the outset that this was untrue. Furthermore, she and the aforementioned Al engaged in a conspiracy to compel me to assume the role of a biological parent to the children he had fathered with her. Her actions constituted a criminal offense, for which she could be subjected to penalties of up to $10,000. Tom added that the penalties could reach $100,000 and 5 years in prison. He also clarified that the charges were not merely those of fraud, but also of conspiracy to commit fraud. After Marie was born, she requested a vasectomy, despite being aware that the children were not his. As a result of her actions, he is now unable to have children. Additionally, she engaged in an affair with another man throughout their marriage. She traveled to the East Coast, where she was with him just last week. She discussed the possibility of divorcing me and moving in with him. I have it all on video if you would like to view it." "Oh my God," Maggie said. "As you can imagine, I am divorcing her instead. Your biological father, but I raised you and I cannot fathom the notion of not having you in my life. I fell in love with you the moment I saw you." Marie ran up to him and embraced him. "Oh, Daddy," she exclaimed. "I love you too," Tom replied, looking up to see Andrew slowly approaching them, struggling to hold back his tears. Tom extended one hand towards him, holding Marie. "It's okay to cry, son," he said. "I often do. Did this myself. Am I still your son?" Andrew inquired, his eyes brimming with tears. "Of course," Tom replied, nodding. "You will always be my son." Andrew joined his father and sister, and the three of them wept together, embracing. "I love you, Dad," Andrew said. "I love you too, son," Tom replied, his eyes also brimming with tears. "Everything will be fine, guys. We will get through this together, Tom said, attempting to reassure them. What happens to Julie now? Andrew asked. Cliff inquired about Tom and the children's well-being. They had regained their composure. Tom stated that the defendant was being taken to the county jail. He added that the district attorney intended to indict her and was pursuing her extradition to face conspiracy charges. He believed that the defendant posed a potential flight risk and might flee to New York if released on bail. The outcome of this strategy would be revealed in due course. It is likely to be on Monday when she has her first hearing. What if they allow her to be released on bail? I would be surprised if they did, but she might request to stay with you. Tom is present and has informed us of your actions. Maggie stated that she is ashamed of you for marrying Tom's children if you did not want them. We heard Julie say something on the other end of the line. Damn it, Julie. You broke the law, Maggie said firmly. We raised you better than this. If they let you out, you can stay here, but do not expect us to condone your actions. We believe the children should not stay with Tom. We overheard something on the other end of the line, and Maggie called out to the children, Guys, do you want to talk to your mother? Andrew and Marie looked at each other for a few moments before answering, No, we don't. Tom and Cliff laughed when they heard this. Maggie turned back to the phone. I'm sorry, Julie, but they are not interested in talking to you right now. Perhaps they will do so after they calm down a little. We will ascertain whether we can find a lawyer for you. It is time for us to take our leave. Maggie regarded Tom, who was still somewhat disconcerted by the turn of events. Everything will be fine, she reassured him. We will be here for you and the children. Perhaps you should return home and freshen up. You can collect them tomorrow. Thank you, Tom replied, embracing her. Cliff shook Tom's hand and the latter embraced the children once more. I'll see you tomorrow, he told them. I love you both and am very proud of you. We love you too, Dad. Marie-Julie was brought in for arraignment the following Monday after hearing arguments from District Attorney Marvin Morrison. The judge ordered her held without bail, citing concerns that she might flee the area and head to New York to be with her lover. 3 months later, a jury found her guilty of 2 counts of paternity fraud and 2 counts of conspiracy to commit fraud. The judge sentenced her to a total of 10 years in prison. Subsequently, she became eligible for parole after 6 years. Following the verdict, her company terminated her employment. Alf was extradited, tried, and convicted, and was sentenced to 5 years in prison. He will become eligible for parole in 3 years. Additionally, the company terminated his employment. The civil case against him took slightly longer, but the jury awarded Tom a substantial sum, which he promptly donated to the Children's College Fund. The defamation suit was dismissed after a judge ruled that Tom had suffered no actual damages. Tom's divorce was granted based on Luce's application. Julie received 30% of their joint bank accounts, which Tom had set aside for her so that she could access it upon her release from prison. He never visited her in prison, but the children did. Once after that, they never returned. Andrew informed Tom that Marie was so upset and angry with their mother that she had almost Andrew, the eldest son, completed his secondary education and pursued a career in the Marine Corps, eventually becoming a military policeman. Tom, his father, was immensely proud of his son and took Marie to observe him graduating as an honorary recruit in his platoon. Tom continued his tenure in the police force and was eventually promoted to the rank of captain following the retirement of Captain J. Smith. In his personal life, Tom's activities were largely confined to his professional pursuits, and he had no significant romantic relationships. Marie's desire to date did not prevent her from playing the role of matchmaker. One day, she returned home with a note and gave it to him. My English teacher, Miss Harris, wants to see you tomorrow after school, she said. I know you're stuck at your desk right now, so there's no reason why you can't be there. You're not trying to play matchmaker again, are you? Tom asked. No, Marie replied, raising her eyebrows. The next day, he went. Upon reaching her room, he was greeted by Miss Harris, who stood and extended her hand, which he accepted. However, as their hands touched, he felt a sudden rush of emotion, and his words became jumbled. He did not want to let go of her hand and looked her over, hoping his gaze was not too obvious. He found her attractive, a rather short, pretty brunette with brown eyes, well-built with beautiful breasts and a charming smile. breasts and a charming smile. "Oh, please call me Brenda. Captain Williams," she said, "and you can call me Mom." He told her, "Marie said that you wanted to see me." "Did she say that?" Brenda asked. Did I say that? I don't remember." "Well, it's always nice to meet the parents of my students." "I understand you're divorced." "Yes, that's true," he said, "and you are raising a teenage daughter alone." "I'm impressed. This must not be easy." "It is not a cause for concern. I am armed and have handcuffs," he informed her with a smile. She laughed and observed that he was not wearing any rings. However, she could see the dents on his finger. "I see that you are not married." "That is correct. I am divorced as well. It appears that my daughter is playing matchmaker once again. I'm sorry for the imposition. I'll leave you to resume your work." "That's okay," she replied. "I was done here anyway, and I was just going to grab a quick bite to eat and then head back to the house, which I'm sure you'll agree is rather isolated. If you're not too busy, perhaps we could have dinner together, and perhaps we'll have a glass of wine later." "Why not?" "I have one question, if you don't mind," he said. "Do you happen to have an ex-boyfriend from college?" He inquired as to whether she had a boyfriend from college. She responded with laughter, indicating that she did not. He then extended his hand and asked her what she liked. He then led her out of the classroom. To subscribe to our channel, click here. The next story is more intriguing than this one.